The story begins with Sansui striking down the enemy commander with an energy sword. The soldiers look at Sansui and exclaim in fear. You are the sword saint. The origin of this story is on an ordinary day in Japan. Sansui was crossing the street, absorbed in his phone, oblivious to the traffic signal. A truck hit Sansui. He only heard the screams of passers-by. His vision gradually darkened, and he couldn't move his body. When Sansui woke up, he was startled by the face of an old man with a white beard. Sansui looked at his body, remembering being hit by a truck. He panicked and looked at the old man, then was even more astonished to see a city beneath him. The old man asked Sansui to quiet down, then corrected him to address him properly, as he was the Lord. Sansui was dumbfounded for a moment before saying that his grandmother, while she was alive, had advised him not to trust anyone claiming to be the Lord. The Lord immediately remembered a granny who had called him a damn old man in a very bitter tone. Sansui realized that this tone could only belong to his grandmother, and slightly scared asked the Lord if he was being punished for doubting his existence. The Lord denied Sanso's assumption and admitted that he had indeed killed him. The Lord said that Sanso's name Shirokuro Sansui sounded outdated, and he hadn't expected it to belong to someone young like Sansui, thinking the name belonged to an old person. He didn't think much before ending the life of the error of that name. After realizing his mistake in killing an innocent life, the Lord felt very bad about it. Sansui doubted the Lord's words, thinking his expression didn't match what he was saying. To compensate for this terrible mistake, the Lord asked Sansui if he wanted to go to another world, offering him powers to ensure he didn't end too soon. There Sansui, without much thought and with eyes shining brightly, immediately expressed his desire for power to become the strongest in that world. It's clear that Sansui is extremely passionate about strength, imagining a scenario where everyone is overwhelmed by his power. The Lord wrote a letter and handed it to Sansui, instructing him to give it to the first man he meets in the new world. This man would train Sansui to become the strongest as Sansui wished. Before Sansui could fully digest the Lord's words, he found himself dropped into a forest. Sansui walked endlessly, calling out, but received no response. Suddenly, from a young tree branch, a young man in a kanashi appeared. He glanced at Sansui and agreed to show him the way to a human village. Remembering the Lord's words, Sansui hastily handed the letter to the young man. After reading it, the young man reluctantly nodded and accepted Sansui as his disciple. He introduced himself as Swaboku from the Swaboku School. A wise man, Swaboku warned Sansui that the lessons would be extremely tough, and for someone seemingly untalented like Sansui, it might take about 500 years of training. Sansui was completely shocked, not expecting such a long time to become the strongest. Sansui officially began training with Swaboku from that moment. The beginning was not as easy as Sansui thought, as he had to run desperately to keep up with Swaboku pace. Upon reaching a wooden house, Swaboku handed Sansui a wooden sword to start training. Sanso's training was to practice sword swings from dawn until sunset. Sansui felt slightly disheartened at the thought of repeating the same motion every day. Swaboku reminded him to focus all his strength into the sword, assuring that persistence would eventually lead to the pinnacle of power. This marked the beginning of Sanso's 500-year training journey. After training with Swaboku, Sansui realized that becoming strong in this new world was extremely difficult and harsh. As soon as the sun rose, Sansui would start practicing. He slept early at night to regain strength for the next day's training. From early morning to dusk, Sansui dedicated his entire mind to the sword. In the first few days, he experienced extreme hunger, but over time, the hunger faded and he stopped thinking about it. From what Swaboku told him, Sansui learned that wise men like his master did not need human food, but lived on CMY with no other choice. Sansui absorbed all the techniques Swaboku taught him day after day. Sansui relentlessly trained over time. His uniform became tattered and he switched to wearing a kanashi like Su Aoku. Sansui was so engrossed in his training that he almost forgot the concept of time. In the blink of an eye, 500 years passed, yet Sansui didn't feel any closer to Swaboku. One day, while training in the forest, Sansui suddenly sensed something entering the woods. Swaboku felt it too, seeming like wolves attacking two vulnerable lives. Upon arriving, they found a pack of wolves had mauled a woman. Sansui rushed to save the newborn baby in the woman's arms, who was miraculously alive. Swaboku didn't sense ki from the girl, but felt magic within her. He believed she wouldn't become a sage, but would fit better growing up in Human society, Swaboku assessed that Sansui had trained seriously enough over the years to be called the strongest and entrusted him with the noble task of raising the baby girl as a father. Sansui held the baby tenderly ready to welcome this new life into his and start a new chapter. Carrying the baby, Sansui crossed the fields. The hungry child kept crying. Despite Sansui's efforts to soothe her, ahead was a village where Sansui hoped to find milk. Sensing the souls of children, there he accurately found a house where a woman was nursing her baby. Sansui claimed his wife had left, leaving behind a newborn crying for milk. The woman, sympathizing with Sansui's single father plight, agreed to nurse the baby. After feeding the baby, stopped crying. The woman suggested Sansui head to the capital for better opportunities. Considering the lack of jobs around the village and his youth after the baby had her fill, she stopped crying. The woman handed the baby back to Sansui and rushed inside to prepare a few things for their journey. Sansui, looking towards the direction the woman had pointed and then around the village, felt everything was new and different. For 500 years he had never left the forest. Sansui had no concept of humans and the society of this world, and he sighed. The baby in his arms suddenly burst into laughter, dispelling all the negative thoughts surrounding Sansui. At the same time, the woman came out of the house, handing Sansui a bag of goat's milk. It was all she had to offer for his journey to the capital with the baby. Sansui profusely thanked her before departing, hoping to return one day to repay her kindness if she were still alive. Sansui moved swiftly, using the blinking step technique. As he passed a carriage, he felt someone chasing him from behind. A loud voice demanded he stop. Sansui immediately halted, still holding the baby. The person who had shouted appeared to be of noble birth. She accused Sansui, calling him a rude commoner for daring to jump onto the roof of her master's carriage. However, seeing Sansui with a child, she did not pursue the matter further, but insisted Sansui show sincere apology to her master inside the carriage. Sansui apologized, admitting his mistake of inadvertently disrupting others' travel. The girl in the carriage cautioned Sansui, then stepped out, surveying his shabby appearance and disheveled hair, deducing his life was quite unstable. She then offered Sansui a chance to come to her mansion with the condition that if he passed the test, he would be given a job. Sansui immediately agreed, surprised by such an offer. The girl introduced herself as Dewey and named Sansui had to remember well. Brower, the girl who had just pointed at Sansui, was about to express her disapproval when Dewey cut her off. Dewey was confident about her decision. Observing Sanso's hands, Dewey remarked they looked like they had wielded a sword for a lifetime. Indeed, 500 years was an immense period during which Sansui had tirelessly practiced swordsmanship. Dewey then turned to Brower, questioning her about the monkey, referring to Sansui, who lacked magical essence but managed to leap over the carriage roof. Dewey looked at Sansui with interest, thinking he might have used some rare sorcery. Sansui, not understanding what they were discussing, knew it was best to remain silent. Sansui recalled what Suboku had once said: in this world, magic was common, but not everyone could use it. 99% of the population could use some form of magic, but the remaining 1% could not use any magic due to the absence of a magical essence, and thus couldn't cast spells. However, they could still produce similar effects to magic through rituals and ceremonies. Sansui's sage techniques were a similar form, and the rare sorcery that Dewey and Brower referred to was about techniques that didn't involve magic. Sansui then rode with Dewey to the capital, sitting outside with the baby. Brower disapproved of Sansui's excited demeanor, dismissing him as a clueless rustic. Dewey, however, was more interested in San's potential usefulness. The carriage stopped at Dewey's mansion, where servants came out to greet her. Seeing Sansui, they were puzzled. Dewey kept calling Sansui the monkey and instructed the butler to arrange a room for Sansui and the baby. The baby in Sanso's arms started crying loudly, but a kind maid helped soothe her. Dai's father and brother, both exuding the aura of experienced soldiers, welcomed her home. Dewey introduced Sansui as a rare magic user, wanting him as her escort. Her father and brother instantly drew their swords towards Sansui. Initially startled, Sansui reflexively responded with his sword. Due to his 500 years of training, Dewey's father was surprised and initiated a duel between his son and Sansui. Not wanting to break a promise to his daughter, he created this test to assess Sanso's abilities. The maid holding the baby asked Sansui the child's name, to which he replied, Rain. The duel began with Dewey's brother in armor and sword rushing forward. Sansui calmly used his energy sword and defeated his opponent with a single strike. Dewey's father was astonished that his son was defeated so quickly by a wooden sword, leaving him no choice but to engage personally. He aimed for Sanso's flank, seizing a moment of perceived vulnerability. However, Sansui reacted swiftly, turning around and jabbing his elbow into his opponent's chest, causing the man to roll away in agony. Dway was quite pleased with this outcome, as it now left no reason for her father and brother to prevent Sansui from becoming her escort. The maid handed Rain over to Sansu arms. The father and son shared a joyous, warm smile, creating a heartwarming scene. Sansui decided this would be where he raised Rain. Although his master's family was a bit eccentric, it wasn't a significant issue at the moment. Sansui felt a bit worried, but he couldn't consider Dway a good master either. When Sansui told Dway that a virtuous person cannot be burned, she immediately attempted to burn Sansui, and when he said a virtuous person cannot drown, Dway actually had Brower try to drown Sansui to death. Sansui concluded that Dway was a selfish person, a spoiled rich girl who got everything she wanted, but it must be said that with her status, Dewey was allowed to act as she pleased. Sansui learned that in the kingdom of Arana, besides the royal family, there were 4 noble families with the most influence and land. Dway, his young mistress, was the haze of the Soap family, her father the head of the family, followed by her brother. Both loved Dewey dearly, which only fueled her selfishness. It's understandable for a pampered lady used to getting everything she wants to gradually form a habit and believe that she deserves everything, despite knowing his mistress was not a very pleasant person. Sansui had no intention of leaving since Rain was still there. If he left, Rain would have nowhere to stay, nothing to eat, and they both would be destitute. The Soap family was indeed generous, helping Sansui raise Rain like any other noble child. Rain had access to books, dressed cleanly and prettily. Dewey treated Rain well, willing to spend entire afternoons enjoying tea and cakes with her. Gradually, Sansui started to see Brower as a kind-hearted person. Brower, though young, was a prodigy in both swordsmanship and magic. Initially cold, Brower gradually opened up after working with Sansui, becoming a reliable teammate. And so 5 years passed in the blink of an eye, until one day Sansui, Rain, and Brower escorted Dewey to the Royal Academy. On the way to the academy, despite Sanso's warning about potential bandits hiding in the mountains, Dway was not afraid. In fact, she found it quite exciting. She left home for the academy simply because life there seemed utterly dreary, and she was determined not to let her future become boring. Rain asked Dway if everyone would be safe. Dway assured her confidently that they would be, thanks to the strength of Sansui and Brower. Seeing Dewey's combative spirit, Sansui broke into a sweat. He thought Rain should be more worried, not so nonchalantly carefree. While Sansui and Brower could control the situation, a bandit attack would be a serious problem. Brower, not fond of this side, in resignation, not wanting to go against her mistress's wishes, the carriage took a detour, heading towards the dangerous mountain path. Night fell quickly, and they soon reached the mountain road. Rain, looking outside, became frightened and clung to Sansui. Sensing the number of enemies, Sansui alerted Brower that it was time to act. Brower left Sansui to protect their master herself, going ahead to deal with all 20 bandits. The bandits emerged from the bushes, brandishing their weapons, ready to hunt. Sansui observed that the bandits seemed to be going through hard times with worn, rusty equipment and gaunt appearances. Brower mocked the bandits as foolish brutes for daring to ambush the Soap family. The bandits laughed loudly, recognizing the family crest on the carriage, indicating their noble status. Brower invoked the spell Wind Cutter, stunning her opponents. The bandits, not expecting Brower to be a sorceress, called for an immediate attack before she could cast more spells. Brower leaped high, and her masterful sword play eliminated 4 bandits in seconds. The rest redirected their attack towards the carriage to take hostages. Sansui drew his energy sword and struck down a one-eyed bandit, rendering him motion. The second bandit attempting to flee was caught by Sansui, who propelled a powerful energy burst, pinning him against a tree. Brower and Sansu then coordinated to eliminate the rest of the bandits, leaving none. The carriage continued towards the Royal Arana Academy, the nation's premier educational institution. By the time the group arrived, it was morning. The academy's principal, a powerful magician, personally welcomed Dewey. I asked the principal whether she should address her as Master Sorceress or not. The principal smiled, subtly preferring to be called by her current title. Dewey and the principal enjoyed their banter-filled conversation, exchanging witty and slightly sarcastic remarks. The principal glanced at Sansui Impressively able to pronounce his full name, aware that Sansui practiced the art of the sage, a rare ability she had never seen or heard of before. She expressed her wish for Sansu to demonstrate his powers in front of the entire school. Dway looked at Sansui, uncertain if he could perform his abilities like a show. Sansui felt a bit self-conscious. Despite 500 years of practice, he had only mastered 4 skills: light speed, which reduces the weight of his body, and anything he touches instant shift, allowing him to move instantly over a distance; energy sword, enabling him to infuse energy into a sword, making it as hard as steel. The last skill, energy release, lets him shock or propel anything he touches. Sansui was slightly disheartened considering the length of his training for just 4 basic skills. He thought Dai knew well about his limitations, so she wouldn't agree to let him perform, sensing Dai's competitive nature. The principal mentioned that the Babel family also allows their escorts to showcase their skills. Dewey's eyes widened. She wouldn't allow anyone to outshine her, so she immediately agreed to let Sansui perform. The principal smiled satisfactorily following her guidance. The group moved to the academy's arena, the Backel family heir. Haynes Babel was there, a pretty face and about the same age as Dewey. Haynes greeted Dewey, to which Day snidely remarked that Haynes' presence was so bland that she couldn't even remember the last time they met. Sansui noticed, despite both girls being promising heirs to their families of similar age and equally beautiful, Haynes was friendly, whereas Dway was odi and arrogant. Sansui observed that the 2 girls with Haynes seemed to possess rare abilities. They exchanged brief greetings before leaving. The remaining person with Happen was a Japanese guy, not only possessing rare abilities, but also capable of using every sorcerer's power. Entering the arena, the principal introduced the upcoming performance of the 4 individuals with rare abilities to the entire student body. First was Princess Suni Megan from the Megan King KDOM, who possessed the ability to transform into a mystical beast, a rare power from a deceased sorcerer in the Megan royal lineage. Next was Tsuga, a master of curse powers. Her curse ability could alter the material she targeted. When she cast a spell on a sword, it immediately became as soft as a ribbon. Finally, the principal announced a competition between Sansui, the strongest swordsman of the country, and Haynes Battelle, Japanese escort Seiga, about to begin. To insisted Sansui must win and show the opponent the difference in their class. Haynes then called out Seiga's name, cheering for him to win and strip the strongest title from the Soit House. Sansui and Seiga felt immense pressure. The principal introduced Sansui as the sword's Saint Prodigy, the best swordsman of the Arcana Kingdom. Sansui understood why he was given such a title. His face, even after 500 years, had not aged, still that of a young man. Sansui, feeling he still fell short of Swaboku, was somewhat embarrassed to be associated with the title Sword Saint. The principal added that Sansui could use a rare ability called the Art of the Sage. Happen started to feel a bit anxious. Next, the principal introduced Seiga as Haynes' fiancé, the future head of the Babel house. Moreover, both Sunny and Tsuga were also betrothed to Seiga. Sansui was astonished to hear this. Seiga possessed support abilities considered essential in combat, as Sansui knew a support sorcerer meant using healing and defense spells, curing team members' wounds. Besides, Seiga could also create magical walls and armor. Indeed, Seiga had formed armor for the mat. Sansui, armed with only a wooden energy sword, sensed only one power emanating from Seiga. Sansui guessed that Seiga's ability to use other skills was a secret, and he presented himself as a support sorcerer. Moreover, judging by Seiga's stance and sword handling, Sansui assessed that his technique was rather poor. The armor on him was not as hard as it appeared to outsider. The audience in the stands watched anxiously as Sansui and Seiga faced off. Sansui suddenly sensed a change in Seiga's abilities and demeanor. Compared to just a few minutes earlier, he suspected Seiga might be able to read minds or, even more significantly, foresee the future. Not wanting to waste time pondering, Sansui made the first move. He used his instant shift technique to quickly close in on Seiga and then struck down with his sword. Seiga raised his steel sword to block, but Sansui, wielding his sword in one hand, summoned the energy relish spell, with the other pushing Seiga against the wall. Seiga's armor shattered, and he was officially defeated by Sansui. Haynes, witnessing this from the stands, was immediately frightened. The principal announced the end of the match. Rain quickly left her seat and ran to Sansu, as Side Seiga, knocked unconscious by Sansui attack, had to be carried on a stretcher to the medical room. After receiving care from the doctors, Seiga regained consciousness. Remembering his defeat by Sansui, Seiga felt deeply humiliated. Papines was certain Sansui had used trickery to injure Seiga. She didn't want him to suffer any more injuries. Seiga genuinely wished to defeat Sansui, even if it meant revealing his secrets and using other powers in this world except for SPE. Cases each person could only possess one unique ability. These abilities are determined at birth and are unchangeable. Those belonging to the sorcerer class could wield elemental powers like fire, water, wind. Earth Brower exemplified this. With her wind cutter technique, those with wisdom could manipulate space, gravity, and life force, known as the art of the sage, as demonstrated by Sansui. Those with loyalty could transform their bodies into animals like Sunny's shape. Shifting ability, Tsuga, represented those with a cursing nature, able to change the properties of objects with her curse power. Lastly, those with a holy nature could create armor, shields, and heal wounds, known as holy sorcery. Each ability was used differently regardless of their powers, except for extraordinarily talented individuals. Elemental sorcerers or rare ability users couldn't harness their powers without proper guidance. Seiga, like Sansui, was from Japan and also accidentally slain by a deity. The deity apologized to Seiga in the same way as to Sansui by granting him special powers and sending him to the same world. Seiga could use not only holy sorcery for support, but also all types of abilities. This was a blessing from the deity, but Seiga was limited to only 4 different powers. These included fire magic, holy sorcery, shape-shifting, and a mysterious ability recorded by many sorcerers as the power to foresee the future, known as divination. With time and practice, Seiga could use the art of the sage, truly a cheat ability. Fearing attention from malevolent forces, Seiga decided to pretend to only use magic. However, to master all 4 abilities, Seiga needed to train diligently for many years. The scene shifts to a forest where Sansui and Seiga are engaged in a minor skirmish. Despite using all his innate abilities, Seiga is quickly overpowered by Sansui. Previously overconfident in his cheat abilities, Seiga had immediately challenged Sansui after his defeat at the arena. In the recent duel, Seiga had created armor, used magic, and amplified his strength with shape-shifting, but his overconfidence led to an embarrassing defeat. Sansui, following Seiga's attack trajectory, directly hit the core, breaking the armor and defeating him instantly. Dway, losing patience, scolded Sansui for forgetting to entertain her, implying his failure. As an escort, she thought Sansui was younger than her. Sansui remained silent, not wanting to reveal the truth that he had lived for 500 years. Dway then shifted to a personal topic, asking if Sansui had an ideal woman in mind. Sansui honestly said that through his training with his master, he had learned to overcome his own desires. Brower blushed, her mood sinking lower than ever, realizing that the concept of romance was completely foreign to Sansui. Seiga, now awake, clenched his fists in anger. Time had flown quickly. It had been a month since Dway enrolled in the academy. Initially, Sansui thought Dway would quickly lose interest, but surprisingly, she was quite attentive to the principal's lectures. Today's lesson from the principal was about failure in the development of magic. Sansui thought the lesson would broaden Dewey's mind, but Dai's reaction was to laugh heartily. Sansui also began to notice a change in his and in Brower's professional relationship. Having known Brower since childhood, it was understandable that she would develop an interest in romance at this age. Dewey sensed something between Sansui and Brower and often teased them about it. Sansui and Brower, of course, did not dare to object, as it would create an uncomfortable situation. Back at Dai's mansion near the academy, Brower met with Sansui privately. She apologized for being distracted from her escort duties, preoccupied with Sansui. Sansui reassured her, creating a relaxed atmosphere. Unbeknownst to them, Dewey and Rain had been watching for some time, intrigued by the emotional developments between Sansui and Brower. Suddenly, Sansui sensed Dai's father and brother approaching the mansion with a significant force. Brower, observing from a lookout, wondered why their outfits suggested a purpose other than just visiting Dewey. It seemed Dway had sent a provocative letter to the 2 men at home. Seeing the frightening demeanor of Dai's brother, Rain immediately clung to Dway in fear. Following Dai's command, Sun Sui stepped forward to restrain the newcomer. With his energy sword, he struck Dai's brother on the head, knocking him out instantly. This scene set the stage for the story, with Sansui using his wooden sword against his opponent, earning the title of Sword Saint from the soldier. Dwi's father, as usual, lost control and charged at Sansui. Once again, Sansui swiftly subdued him, leaving the soldiers in awe. Sansui helped Dee's father and brother on horses and handed them over to the soldiers, having only rendered them temporarily unconscious. A young soldier stepped forward to apologize for the inconvenience, still prepared to lead the troop following Dai's orders to the location mentioned in the letter. Meanwhile, in another carriage, Seiga felt secure with a holy sword exacts for upcoming battles. It turned out that Dai's father and brother led an army to test how Sansui would react in emergency situations. They were only testing Sanso's worthiness as an escort for the family's beloved daughter. Reluctantly, Dai's father had to admit that Sansui passed this unexpected test. Sansui knew the two were just pretending and chose to remain silent, listening. Suddenly, Dewey's father spoke up, throwing the letter onto the table and demanding an explanation for its content. The letter from Dway stated that she and Sansui would marry. Brower would bear their children. Brower was left speechless. Dai's brother suggested appointing Sansui to a more suitable position for marrying a noble woman like Brower. Dewey's father was clearly against the idea of Sansui, and his daughter Dway could ask for anything, but marrying Sansui was out of the question. Changing the subject, Dewey's father wanted to confirm if Hain's fiancée Seiga could indeed use all the abilities. Dway affirmed that Seiga could use holy sorcery, shape-shifting, and elemental power. Seiga was truly a threat. His possession of these abilities was also why the Beidou family chose to adopt him. The Soaked family, competitive by nature, was sure that having Sansui, the sword saint prodigy and the country's strongest swordsman, would elevate their status. Sansui humbly responded that his abilities were still far behind his master Swaboku. Compared to Swaboku, Sansui considered himself an amateur. Dai's father and brother were intrigued, wondering just how powerful Swaboku must have. Sansui, with his unmatched strength, still saw himself as an amateur. Dway was equally surprised, unable to believe the significant power gap between Sansui and Swaboku. Dee's father then inquired if Seiga also possessed wisdom and could have learned the art of the sage. Sansui denied this. All the skills he used were basic, but it took him 500 years to learn them. It wouldn't be possible for Seiga to copy them just by watching. As the conversation was about to shift back to Sansui and Brower, the Babel family's carriage arrived at the mansion. Hain stepped out first and bowed politely. Doi ignored Happen, considering her visit a challenge to some trivial competition. Happen announced that Seiga had been recognized as the master of the holy sword, so they would engage in a significant battle. Seiga, having trained diligently for a month, was eager to defeat Sansui and make up for his previous 2 losses earlier. At the Babel mansion, Haines, along with Seiga, Sunny, and Tsuga met with her father. She apologized for hastily revealing Seiga's secret to Dewey. Her father also reprimanded Seiga for his impatience, but suggested that if Seiga aspired to be the strongest, he might be able to pull the holy sword. As he spoke, Hain's father produced a carefully stored map from a small chest and handed it to Seiga. The map would lead Seiga to the location of the most powerful holy sword, named XAX. The 3 girls were shocked to learn that the legendary holy sword truly existed in this land. Exacts from the ancient Arcana Kingdom era was known to be wielded by a swordsman powerful enough to destroy an entire nation. Seiga and the 3 girls immediately set out to find the holy sword. It took them nearly half a day to reach the cave where the sword was located. Seiga was astounded by the magic of Exacts when he saw it. A talking sword did not expect anyone to seek it for its power. Despite Exact's firm refusal, Seiga persisted, insisting he needed to defeat someone at any cost. Seiga declared he was no ordinary person, blessed by the gods with unbeatable strength. Exact demanded proof of Seiga's determination. Seiga promptly split a rock blocking the cave's entrance with his sword, demonstrating his desire to possess Exacts. Returning to the scene of the upcoming duel, Dai's brother took the role of referee. X, now transformed from a sword into a young boy, stood beside Seiga. As the match started, Exacts ignited and flamed. Seiga created a layer of armor around his body, drew a fire sword from XX, and summoned wolf magic for shape shifting. Seiga transformed into a large wolf in armor, wielding a fire sword. The combination of the holy sword, Exacts, and Seiga's superior offensive abilities significantly enhanced his defense and physical strength. Moreover, Seiga's divination skills were also greatly improved, allowing him to anticipate upcoming events. Seiga initiated the attack, charging forward with a destructive strike. However, Sanu's incredible speed allowed him to snatch the sword from Seiga's hand, causing him to lose balance and fall. Transforming back to his human form from his beast shape, it became evident that Seiga's defeat was due to insufficient training. This was seen as Seiga's most disastrous match, yet Seiga was defeated exactly as. Sansui had anticipated Seiga's divination skill, could foresee events within his field of vision, but Sansui unexpected. Move caught him off guard, leading to his dominance. The match ended anticlimactically. Happened Suga and Sunny couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. Seiga's swift defeat was unforeseen. Haynes was baffled as to how Seiga, despite his diligent training, still lost to Sansui. Sunny, albeit reluctantly, had to accept the reality that Sansui was far beyond what Seiga had imagined. Sans light speed not only lightened his body but also anything he touched at that moment. Sansui made Seiga lighter, causing his sword swing's momentum to turn against him, spinning him around due to inertia. This was the sole action Sansui needed to defeat Seiga. Dai's father, like everyone else, was in disbelief. The speed of Sansui was incomprehensible, and his ability to defeat an opponent with just a touch was astounding. There was a stunned silence around, with no one speaking. XX, who had thought Sansui was hiding his strength, now realized that Sansui was far more powerful than imagined. Exact watched Sansui's retreating figure, recognizing a movement and style eerily familiar to only one person. Yexe loudly asked if Sansui was a disciple of Suboku. Surprised, Sansui turned to see Exact sitting collapsed on the ground, weeping. Exact recognized that Sansui's recent move was characteristic of Suboku disciple. It turned out XX's previous master was Sansu master. However, there was a puzzle. The history of the Arcana Kingdom was ancient, and no one from that time was believed to be alive. Exact dismissed the possibility of Sanso's master being a descendant of Suboku, convinced that Suboku still existed in this realm in the past. Suboku had embedded Exact's then in sword form into a rock before leaving. Suboku aspired to become the strongest without relying on anything. The atmosphere became heavy as Sansui realized that Suboku might be the person XAX was referring to during his training with Suboku. Sansui had never heard his master mention Exact's way, questioned Sanso's true age, and he hesitantly revealed that he had been training for about 500 years back at the Soap family's mansion. The subsequent conversation felt like an interrogation. Dway expressed feeling betrayed because during Sanso's time with her family they knew nothing about such significant information. DWI's father and brother understood Sansui hadn't intentionally deceived them, but the revelation was still shocking and hard to accept. Mr. Soid simply wanted Sansui to clarify everything honestly without the need for proof. Sansui cooperated, calmly explaining that he never intended to deceive the Soap family and had no reason to hide any information. He recounted his origin from another world, being mistakenly killed by a deity. Meeting Suboku and becoming his disciple. He described his 500 years of sword training and meeting Rain Dai's family found it hard to believe Sansui's story due to its implausibility. However, they chose to trust Sansui not because of his narrative, but because of the strength he had shown over time. They also agreed with the nickname given to him by others, the Sword Saint. Prodigy Dway felt it was unreasonable that Sansui only practiced swordsmanship for such a long time and learned just 4 basic skills. Sansui assured that everything he said was the truth. Now everyone understood why being a sage and mastering the art of the sage was not something an ordinary person could achieve. Rain asked why Sansui had chosen her current name contrary to Rain's expectations. Sansui replied that he had randomly thought of it with no deep meaning or reason behind it, leaving Rain feeling disappointed. Meanwhile, at the Bakel mansion, a serious conversation ensued. Haynes' father spoke first, noting that it was no surprise Sansui was so strong, having trained relentlessly for 500 years. Sunny mentioned that in the kingdom of Magin, there are legends about sages who could lift entire mountains and control the clouds. Such tales seemed like mere fairy tales, but Exe confirmed they were indeed true. Exe recounted an instance where Suboku lifted a colossal mountain and flung it into the sky. Not only that, Suboku LS also had the power to control the weather. LC felt quite embarrassed for boasting about a month of training to someone who had practiced for 500 years. Hans wondered why Sansui was escorting Dway. The room fell into an uneasy silence. Again, XX asked Seiga if he wished to challenge Sansui again. Suga immediately became agitated. She didn't want Seiga to get hurt any further. XX agreed with Tia's view, suggesting that if Seiga could defeat Suboku disciple, he would need to train 10 times harder than the time Sansui spent training. A few days after the battle, Rain, now an imposing figure, was lecturing Sansui. Somehow Rain had discovered that she and Sansui were not blood-related when Rain learned the origin of her name Rain. She was really angry at Sansui's response. Whenever she had the chance, Rain would bring up the past to criticize Sansui for being indifferent when naming her unable to argue back. Sansui had no choice but to bow deeply and apologize to his daughter. Today happens along with others in the group visited Dewey's mansion. Upon seeing Sansui again, Seiga immediately admitted defeat. Hans looked at Seiga, struggling to accept his readiness to give up, although Seiga might not feel satisfied. Hayes couldn't do anything about it. Dway complimented Seiga for appearing more mature. Seiga didn't argue and admitted that he had acted foolishly in the past, causing trouble for everyone. The reason behind Seiga's challenges was his refusal to accept defeat. Seiga vowed to use his powers only to protect others. From now on, Sansui reminisced about their battle a few days ago. Seiga tried to act tough, but Sansui came out unscathed. Sansui glanced at Exact, feeling that the sacred sword Seiga found was the same one Swaboku had used before. Exact then voiced a doubt. He wondered why Swaboku, disciple Sansui, was working for an ordinary person. Du showed some interest in Swaboku, a person with unrivaled strength. In XX's tale, Swaboku was a man of ambition and pride. Numerous kingdoms were destroyed in attempts to confront Soka's wrath. People likened Swaboku to an erupting volcano. Yexe added that Swaboku once turned a forest into barren land. During his practice, Rain felt excited and even admired that Sansui was a disciple of such a powerful figure. Sansui, meanwhile, couldn't believe Swaboku did such crazy things in the past, but seeing Rain's excited face, he chose to remain silent. Everyone was engrossed in Exact stories, unaware that a mysterious figure was eavesdropping on their conversation. Sansui wondered what Swaboku was doing at that moment in the area where Swaboku resided. Two grave robbers brazenly intruded, intending to assassinate him. As if reading the minds of the strangers, Swaboku revealed that the grave they sought was where 5 years ago a silver-haired woman with a newborn was attacked by wolves. The two men grew curious about what happened to the child. Suaku mentioned that his disciple had taken care of the child in the human world. The men whispered something to each other and left. Swaboku too pondered what his disciple had been up to. All this time, the scene shifts to the Royal Academy. In the principal's office, Stendo, the first princess of Arana, reports on the information gathered about Sansui. Stendo was the one who dropped outside Dai's mansion. However, all the information she had was virtually zero. Stendo couldn't find any clues about Sansui except for his name, like others. After hearing about Sansui being a swordsman who lived for over 500 years, Stendo, though skeptical, was forced to believe it. The principal shifted the topic, admitting that Seiga was also very strong, even if he couldn't match Sansui. Stendo suggested that with his current skill level, Seiga could be the captain of the royal army. Pausing for a moment, Stendo added that the royal family couldn't lag behind. They needed to find someone exceptional, someone with strength and abilities like Seiga. Moreover, this person should not only be a match for Sansui, but also capable of defeating the Thunder Sword. Back at Dai's private mansion, after enduring Rain's wrath, Sansui was subjected to her philosophical lecture. Dway had considered the possibility of Sansui being older than her, but in reality, Sansui was older by 500 years. Sansui bowed his head, apologizing for keeping this a secret. Dewey began to reconsider the situation between Sansui and Brower. She didn't want Brower to marry a 500-year-old man. After much thought, Dway found the matter increasingly complicated and decided to put it aside temporarily. Speaking of marriage, Dway also wished to find a suitable man, someone with an appropriate appearance and family background, someone who wouldn't embarrass her, and most importantly, someone strong enough to protect the Soaked family. Sansui remembered the two men of the Soaked house, thinking it would be hard for anyone to meet Dewey's requirements. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. A guard from the Caputo family delivered an urgent letter to Dway. The letter was from Palette, the daughter of the Caputo house. It mentioned that a powerful swordsman from another kingdom had arrived, challenging the strongest swordsman in Arcana. Sansui, at the end of the letter, Palette said she would explain more in person and reminded Dway to come with Sansui to the Caputo territory. Dway suddenly inquired about the swordsman. The guard described him as coming from a wealthy noble family and being very handsome. Dai's eyes lit up. She immediately decided to travel to the Caputo lands. After half a day's journey, the group arrived in the bustling modern streets of Caputo, where homeless people lay scattered along the road. Sansui then realized Dway didn't have a fiancé. Usually noble families arrange marriages for their children from a young age, but Dewey's father and brother would never allow her to be betrothed. It seemed that Dewey had never shown interest in anyone. Before, as the group approached the city center, they noticed a noisy crowd gathered. Sansui overheard that a foreign swordsman and a local noble were in a dispute. The swordsman's appearance was truly captivating, with bright features, a tall stature, and a deep, steady voice. Dewey was instantly enchanted as Sway felt like the world revolved around this man. Palette. Then appeared the author of the letter inviting Dway to Caputo. She recounted that a few days ago, town a foreigner and Mr. Pad Nuri, a noble from the Domino Empire, had caused a commotion in the area. Both claimed to be right and wanted to sue each other. Sansui had heard of the Domino Empire, a neighboring country that had recently succeeded in a revolution, overthrowing the old government. The entire royal family was captured, and the No of Arana sought refuge in various places. The cause of the altercation remained unclear, but Dway already assumed that the pitiful noble Nuri was at fault. Palette suggested listening to both sides before making any judgment. Town spoke up, declaring he had nothing to fear, but wouldn't let himself be wronged. Pausing, Town turned to Sansui and said if he wanted a direct answer, Little Saint Swordsman Sansui would have to defeat him. Dway reminded Sansui to be gentle and not injure Town. Palette seemed to share Dewey's sentiment. Nuri thought Sansui would surely be torn apart by Town if Sansui were defeated by Town. Dewey's death would surely result in Town's punishment, and then Nuri could act without concern. Conversely, if Sansui were a skilled swordsman, then Town would surely die. Brower, observing from a distance, could feel the power emanating from Town. She suddenly became worried for Sansui. Dway, completely captivated by Town, had already set her sights on him as her future fiancé. Town, being a foreigner, towered a full head taller than Sansui. Town unleashed his dance of the dark, seemingly splitting himself into two and attacking Sansui. Town moved swiftly, the force of his sword not to be underestimated. The clashing of their swords created ear-piercing sounds. Sansui struck at the original Town's copy, causing it to gradually fade. Town then used his Cloak of Darkness technique to create two more copies and charged again. Sansui remained calm, quickly defeating the two copies. The spectators cheered as if they were witnessing such an exciting duel for the first time. Dewey was intrigued by Town's cloning magic, a rare ability she had never seen before. Palette eyes were on Sansui, silently cheering for him. Sansui was strong, but his opponent Town was also formidable. Sansui realized Town was using numbers to overwhelm him. He guessed that with each clone, Town created the control improved. Even without the cloning skill, Sansui still regarded Town as a skilled swordsman, physically stronger than even Brower. Town felt exhilarated by Sansui's strength. He exclaimed in disbelief at the existence of a swordsman with such tremendous power. It was at this moment that Town finally unleashed his secret skill, ending his statement. Town created 6 more clones and initiated his dance of death. Sansui assessed that with this technique, quick reflexes were key. Defeating one clone would only lead to another clone attacking simultaneously. An ordinary person would surely be defeated, but as an experienced combatant, Sansui moved with precise accuracy, charging towards Town, anticipating Town's next move. Sansui was determined to take him down directly approaching Town. Sansui still held his sword, but a second later, he tossed it high, distracting Town. Seizing the moment, Sansui snatched Town's sword and held it to his throat. Town conceded defeat, admitting that Sansui had truly broadened his perspective. Brower guessed that during the battle, Sansui had read Town's attack patterns. Town acknowledged his mistake in underestimating Sansui. Just as Brower thought Sansui had indeed predicted Town's moves. Now Town happily agreed to resolve the dispute through the council. Nuri was dragged to the holy magistrate to settle the matter. Despite his struggles, Dway left Brower to look after Rain, while she and Sansui went to the council. Reluctantly, Brower became a babysitter while showing Rain around Caputo City. Brower heard numerous whispers and discussions from the locals about the duel between Sansui and Town. Young women were especially charmed by the attractive appearances of the two men. Rain asked Brower if Dway would marry Town. Brower replied that it depended on the decision of their boss. And young Master Rain, looking worried, then asked if there was any chance Brower could fall for Town. Caught off guard by the question, Brower stuttered, unsure of how to respond. In truth, Brower wasn't clear about her feelings, but she was certain that Sansui was the only one she wanted to marry. Rain, like a wise old lady, told Brower to be clear about her feelings with everyone. The two continued their walk before returning to the Manson mansion. Later, Dewey's Sansui Palette and Town returned, as well seeing Sansui. Looking tired, Brower decided to postpone the conversation she wanted to have at the council palette requested the use of. A cursed spell to turn liars into stone. Nuri had attempted to assault a girl, and Town intervened to stop him, leading to the altercation. Things escalated when Nuri provocatively pushed Town to draw his sword and teach him a lesson. Dewey couldn't help but find humor in recalling Nussi's failed resistance. Town admitted he had behaved childishly and caused a disturbance. Feeling partly at fault, he declined Pet's apology. Feeling satisfied with using the curse magic to interrogate and make the evildoer confess, all four from Dewey's side thought Town's response was quite cool. Town also didn't forget to express his admiration for the Saint Swordsman Sansui. Suddenly Town stood up and knelt before Sansui, expressing his wish to become San's disciple. Dway generously stated that Town could come to her villa after being accepted by Sansui. Town immediately agreed, introducing himself fully as Town Major. A surprising coincidence was revealed. Sony was Town's biological sister. Town was shocked to learn his sister was engaged to another swordsman and was eager to meet her and understand the situation. Dway envisioned a far-reaching scenario, unable to believe she might become related by marriage to Hain. Pallet saw off the guests from Arana on the ride back townside, guessing Sunny was causing more trouble for the kingdom of Arana. He felt uneasy about his mischievous sister. Dway commented that if they were talking about trouble, Sega-sun's fiancé was 10,000 times more troublesome. Sansui and Brower nodded without comment. Town expressed his surprise at discovering Sansui was a sage in the Majin country. Ancient legend spoke of sages, leading Town to realize that Sansui was one of them. Town seemed unable to fully express his joy and honor at being guided by Sansui, who had endured 500 years of arduous training. Sansui thought that he could hardly continue to refuse and would feel guilty if he didn't accept Town's request to become his disciple. However, Sansui wanted everyone to meet Swaboka to ask his master's permission first. Dway wondered why Sansui couldn't go alone. Sansui explained that Swaboku had previously instructed him not to return to the forest until Rain was grown up. Dway agreed to meet Swaboku and suggested that they could also stop by Hain's house to ask if XAX would guide them. Town felt as if he was bringing trouble to everyone. Dewey, who had a soft spot for handsome men like Town, smiled and said she was also interested in meeting Sansui. Master Brower suddenly stood up and implored Dewey to reconsider canceling her and Sansui engagement. Dway wanted to confirm what Brower just said, turning to Sansui and suggesting he should inform Swaboku about their marriage. Sansui felt a bit awkward and wanted to discuss this matter after returning to the mansion. Half an hour later at the mansion Villa, Town apologized to everyone for his sister's action. He also expressed his gratitude for the kind treatment he received from the people of Arana, despite knowing his home country's royal family's tradition of maintaining bloodline purity. Sunny was directly reprimanded by Town. She hadn't expected her brother to find her there. Dewey changed the topic, wanted to ask Sega to borrow XX's sword to guide them to Sub. Boku Happen and his father were surprised to learn that Sansui was still not proficient in his technique despite 500 years of practice. Exact transformed from a sword to human form in an instant. He agreed to lead everyone to Swaboku except for Hain's father. Everyone was eager to meet Swaboku and insisted on going along. Dway decided they would set off the next morning. Sansui and Brower were extremely confused about how to approach the topic of marriage. After returning to Day's villa, Brower and Sansui met to talk, but it seemed to lead nowhere. Initially, neither of them could start the conversation, creating an extremely awkward atmosphere. Then they both spoke at the same time. Brower worried she was being impertinent for interrupting Sansui. Her mind was in turmoil. She couldn't bluntly ask Sansui to marry her. Sansui was equally perplexed. After 500 years, this was the first time he faced such an ironic situation with a girl. Finally, Brower blurted out that she wanted Sansui to take responsibility for everything. Sansui was taken aback, not knowing what he was supposed to be responsible for. The next morning, in front of everyone, Sansui announced that he and Brower had decided to get married. While everyone was still surprised, Dway hurried them into the vehicle to go to Soka's place. After half a day's journey, the group finally reached the forest at the border of the kingdom of Arana to show respect to their senior Sansui, and the group chose to walk instead of using horse-drawn carriages. After walking for a while, Dway grew a bit impatient, really wanted to know how much longer it would take to meet Swaboku. Swaboku appeared, unexpectedly startling the group. Seeing Swaboku after such a long time, Exact couldn't hold back his tears. He ran straight to Swaboku and hugged him tightly, since being left by Swaboku on The rock in the cave exec had been constantly thinking about him, always remembering his former master, although Exac's previously described Swaboku as difficult and hard to tolerate. His heart overflowed with emotions upon seeing his old friend again. Swaboku didn't refuse XX's embrace, comforting him like an older brother to a younger one after listening to Sansui recount his life over the past 5 years since leaving the forest. Swaboku was also happy to hear that his student now had a family. Swaboku reminded Rain to pay respects at the grave of the silver-haired woman who had protected her as a child. Later, Oku turned to Seiga and Sansui to discuss the meaning of being the strongest. Seiga genuinely wanted to understand Soka's concept of a swordsman. General Swaboku responded that Sensui's approach and conduct were his ideal. After a while, Swaboku revealed that 2 strangers had come looking for Rain. The group became suspicious of the motives of these unknown individuals. Dewey speculated that the stranger's search for Rain might be related to the incident 5 years ago and could be connected to the Domino Empire. At the Caputo Mansion, Palette had a confidential conversation with Stendo. Palette disclosed that the leader of the Domino Empire had recently sent troops into the eastern territory of the Caputo family, demanding the surrender of Nuri and other nobles seeking refuge in Caputo. Stendo immediately realized this was just a pretext, as the Domino Empire had been planning to invade Caputo for some time. Palette was well aware of this dirty plan, but felt powerless. Stendo was puzzled why Caputo chose to resist alone instead of seeking help from other nobles or the royal family. Some leaders of the royal family possessed 4 of the 8 sacred treasures, including Unq, a relic capable of cloning any object. Palette mentioned Seiga and Sansui, who possess immense power capable of shattering any obstacles in their way. Stendo had also heard about Sansui, a person capable of wielding a thunder sword to defeat the entire royal army. Palette mentioned that the Caputo family had the strongest mage whose power could be said to be 50 times greater than other elite mages. His name was Yub Shizu, able to manipulate all elements and obliterate entire region. Currently, Shizu was with the Caputo family's head. Shizu's imminent test of his power had everyone on edge, confident he valued protecting Caputo's city and would strive to his utmost. The head of the Caputo family could do nothing but trust him implicitly. Now, there was no one more elite than Shizu to defeat the enemy. Minutes later, the rival army approached the city gates. Shizu, known as the Caputo family's trump card, was responsible for annihilating the invading forces. As the family head finished speaking, Shizu conjured a massive magical sphere in the sky. The enemy relaxed at the prospect of seizing Caputo's city, was instantly terrified by the magic. Orbit grew larger, and as it neared the soldiers, they realized it was a fireball capable of incinerating an entire area. Shizu immediately directed the fireball onto the enemy, burning them to ashes. The Caputo army was stunned, and even Shizu was shocked by his own ability. The smoke from the fireball caught Nura's attention. He desired to possess the mage who wielded such terrifying power to overthrow the Domino Empire. A guard then informed Nuri that they had found the last survivor of the royal family, Haynes, and Dewey's father, along with Dai's brother, had somehow learned of this and followed the group to the Arcana border. Upon dismounting, Dai's brother aggressively confronted Town, demanding to know who dared approach his sister. Apart from Sansui, the others were still in the forest talking with Swaboku. As they emerged, a strange aura enveloped them. Haynes and Dewey were surprised to see their father and brother following them. Town noticed Dewey's brother and greeted him with a friendly smile, intending to shake hands. Suddenly, brother changed his tone and drew his sword to attack Town. Sansui had to knock him with a stick to stop his reckless behavior. Haynes' father recounted that after Sansui group left, the Caputo family contacted him. A new invading army from the Domino Empire had arrived, but they were repelled by a single wizard. The situation was far from over. Dewey's brother added that the Caputo family had a powerful wizard under their command, and it seemed the royal family was considering risk strategies due to their lack of military strength. It was likely that the royals would use this wizard and Sansui as trump cards to prevent war. Ever since Sansui wiped out the royal guards on the day Dewey's brother became the family head, the royal family had held a grudge against Sansui. Now the group had to immediately head to Caputo territory. The discussion about taking temporary disciples had to be paused to address this urgent matter. Town and Sunny, being foreigners, were a concern for Hein's father, who didn't want them to be troubled. Both brothers insisted that people from Magin never run from war. Town, having inconvenienced Palette, was now ready to help if her country was in danger. Dui was utterly charmed by town's nobility. Her thoughts were now completely occupied by town. Sansui suggested that town join them with Dui. Town happily agreed, despite Dai's brother's anger. Thus the heads of the four great noble families and their trump cards, or heroes, J, gathered in Caputo's territory at the national border. Shizu, after repelling the invaders, sat in a daze where the fireball had landed. Palette and her escort were also present. She was worried about Shizu's mental state, having maintained the same sitting position since the battle ended. The head of the Caputo army was also deeply concerned about Shizu's mood and sincerely wanted to support him. Shizu, realizing Palette had been beside him all along, greeted her with a smile. Palette expressed her deep gratitude to Shizu, acknowledging that without him Caputo's city would have been overrun. The war was not entirely over yet. Palette declared that the Caputo family would ensure its end, as it was their duty. Sansui group continued their journey. Dui was slightly upset not being able to ride in the same carriage as town, her face showing clear disappointment. Dui's brother, on the other hand, felt this arrangement was appropriate. He still didn't want his sister to pay too much attention to town. The atmosphere in the carriage was stifling. Sansui broke the silence, asking Dui's brother if anyone had been searching for Rain in the Soap family's villa. Brower suspected that the person might be from the Domino Empire's noble refugees in Arcana. Rain felt uneasy and asked Sansui if everything was really all right. Sansui reassured her gently. Dui's brother also spoke up. As the head of the soaped house and ruler of its domain, his duty was to protect everyone, and he wouldn't hesitate to risk his life for the safety of his family and people. This was the first decent thing Dui's brother had said from the beginning. Rain was genuinely moved and admired the coolness of the house head. Dui also affirmed that she wouldn't let anyone harm Rain, not even a hair. Brower and Sansui refrained from commenting, knowing that beyond words Dui wouldn't do much. In the other carriage, Sega asked Town if he was seriously considering marrying Dui. Town knew that everyone was hinting at Dewey's brother's aggressive attitude being problematic. Town understood it as a normal reaction of a brother wanting to protect his sister. Haynes' father wanted everyone to focus more on the upcoming war than personal issues. Sega thought it was unreasonable for the Arana royalty to want to retaliate against the invading new Domino. Haynes' father thought it would be foolish for them to ignore national interests just to strengthen the Arana royalty. Butcher's intentions were clear. He wanted to restrain the war at all costs. The Kingdom of Arana was established 300 years ago, excluding long-lived individuals like Su Aoku and Sansui. For others, Arana had existed for a very long time. The country had four major noble houses equal in power to the royal family. These four noble houses had provided military support to the royal family since the nation's founding. The two warrior families were Soaped and Babel. The Caputo family was known for producing generations filled with compassion. Finally, the Cursed Merchant family Deja had made significant contributions to the royal family at the nation's founding. Each royal generation granted territories as large as their own. With these lands, they also bestowed a certain amount of power. Although it sounded good in theory, the reality was that the kingdom had 5 regions, and the royal family only managed one of them. In times of crisis, the 5 families united, but afterwards the king could no longer control the country according to his wishes. Moreover, power isn't everything. The Soaped family openly defied the royal family by letting Sansui decimate the royal guards. Currently, Arana has 4 heroic figures representing the 4 noble families known as trump cards. Additionally, there are 2 of the 8 divine weapons that the royal family cannot access. Just as the 4 noble families worry about the royal family's recklessness, the royal family fears the expanding power of the nobles. It's understandable that the royal family desires a trump card of their own. At the Caputo family mansion, Stendo and his father were having a confidential conversation. Stendo mentioned that they couldn't lay a finger on Fushir Uka, the leader of the new government who successfully overthrew the Domino Empire. The issue King Arana wanted to address was how to acquire one of UK's 4 divine weapons. Stendo wanted to use the upcoming war to achieve this. To seize one of the 4 divine weapons, Nuri arrived, seeking an audience with the King of Arana at any cost as a treasonous noble. Additionally, Nuri wanted to discuss the daughter of the Holy Sword. After being granted an audience, Nuri revealed that 6 years earlier, after the great former emperor of the Domino Empire died, a wet nurse had fled with a child of royal blood. Nisi soldiers had been searching for the girl and found the tomb of the wetter. They also encountered Swaboku and learned that Swaboka disciple was raising the child, putting everything together. Rain was identified as the daughter of the former Emperor. Nuri's plan was to use Rain's identity alongside the magical power of the Caputo to annihilate the rebels and revive the Domino Empire. The king decided to call a meeting with the four great noble families which Nuri was also to attend. Going through the list, the Soid family had Sansui as their trump card. The Bakal family had Seiga, the Caputo family had Shu, and the Digia family also had someone, though their name was unknown. The four great noble families and their trump cards decided gather for a chat before meeting with King. Arana Sansui had a feeling that the trump cards of Caputo and Dia might also be Japanese. At the Caputo family mansion, everyone had gathered in great numbers. Shizu was more excited than ever, rushing to shake hands with Seiga and then expressing his admiration to Sansui. Shizu mentioned he was sad for not meeting Sansui during his last visit to Caputo, continuously shaking Sanso's hand. While speaking, Dway thought the boy seemed hyperactive. Palette introduced Shizu with some embarrassment as the Caputo family's trump card. Both Seiga and Sansui found the Caputo family members to be friendly and kind-hearted. The atmosphere became livelier with the arrival of the Doja family. Besides the family head, he brought a woman named Pandora and a man named Shundai's brother representing the Soid family. Greeted Mr. Bia Haynes' father representing the Bakal family also praised Thesa as a great general since the arrival of the Dea family. Sansui felt an odd energy from Pandora, but nothing from Shun. Both Shun and Pandora had mesmerizing appearances with sharp features and impeccable demeanors. Exin, his sword form behind Seiga, suddenly transformed into a human. He was overjoyed to see Pandora, who was also one of the divine weapons capable of causing disaster. Through curses, Pandora burst into laughter upon learning that Seiga was XX's new master. She added insult to injury by asking Yexe if he was abandoned by his previous master. Swaboko XX was so furious that his face turned red, and he clenched his fists, wishing he could sew Pandora's mouth shut. After laughing, Pandora turned to Sansui, asking arrogantly if he was a disciple of XX's monstrous former master. As Pandora was tall and Sansui shorter, she had to bend down to speak to him. Suddenly, she changed her tone, lamenting that Sansui was a nightmare, claiming one person like Swaboku was enough, and that another similar individual shouldn't exist. Shun appeared calmer than Pandora, seemingly embarrassed by his teammates' antic. At that moment, Akril, the future head of the Dia family, made an absurd entrance. She was completely naked. Everyone was speechless at the future family head's behavior. The king and the four great noble families gathered to discuss how to deal with Domino's new government. The king's first words were to praise the Caputo family for their exceptional fighting, even though the enemy army was equipped with weapons and armor made from divine weapons. The Caputo family did not hesitate to battle them. The humble leader of Caputo region expressed that Caputo was merely fulfilling its assigned duty. Subsequently, the leader of Caputo voiced his opinion and represented the governing body of the Caputo territory. He believed that despite the war instigated by the new government of Domino, a larger nation peace was the preferable path. More specifically, Caputo wished to pardon the nation that had infringed upon Arana. The Caputo leader, displaying great humanity, mentioned that most of the enemy troops had been annihilated, leaving only a small number remaining. Mr. Battelle argued that since the enemy threatened Caputo's land and Caputo repelled them, respecting Cap P's opinion was appropriate, although the invading army was completely destroyed and the national honor not severely damaged. There remained a concern troubling the king. The king summoned Nuri to the council room. Mr. Batchel and Dai's elder brother were perplexed by the king's decision to allow a Domino noble to attend. Nuri revealed astonishing information from his investigation related to the sacred sword. Sansui and Rain's daughter Nuri confirmed that Rain was the princess of the royal family of the Domino Empire. He continued, stating that with the power of Caputo's witches, it would be easy to annihilate the traitorous self-proclaimed new government of Domino, and then elevate Riane as queen to rebuild Domino. The head of the Soid family, Dai elder brother, found this laughable. He spat in Nuri's overconfident face, dismissing his absurd claims. Mr. Dia believed the king was too credulous towards a false noble like Nuri. Then Nuri boldly stated that using Arcana's resources and people to save another nation was akin to betraying their own citizens. The king had no such intention. He mentioned that the new leader of Domino, Fushir Uku, had imprisoned the old Domino royal family And one of the 8 divine weapons he possessed was the Demon Blade Dean SLA. This blade had the vexing ability to locate anyone sharing blood with a person whose blood it had tasted if Rain truly was a descendant of the ancient Domino Emperor, who Q would not leave her be the king, was nearly decided to establish relations with the new Domino government to avoid future disasters. Nuri tried to say something else, but the king dismissed him. He could do nothing but leave in resentment. The divine weapons in UK's possession are as follows: uncooked, capable of replicating any man-made object. Vajra, granting its owner the power to control the weather. Exceler, which can alter fate to protect its owner from death. And lastly, Dawson, slave, with the abilities as mentioned earlier. Now, all 4 major families and the royal house of Arana must cooperate to protect the national interest, while the king and the family heads were discussing how to deal with a new government of Domino. Sansui and the others were enjoying coffee and chatting in front of Shizu's house. Tsuga was puzzled as both Palette and Shizu were cursed. Shizu explained that his magic once activated spontaneously, causing his house to explode multiple times. Essentially, Shizu's magic activates unconsciously and can destroy buildings to prevent Shizu's magic from inadvertently exploding. Palette and Caputo placed a curse on him. Palette, or Caputo, as Shizu's guardian, ensures that he cannot use magic without permission, not limiting his talents. Shizu chose to live on the outskirts of Caputo City, fearing that an accidental explosion could endanger lives in a densely populated area. Despite the instability, Shizu wasn't troubled by it. Elsewhere, Dway and Happiness were at odds. Dway felt superior as Seiga, the future leader of the Bach, was learning from his guardian Sansui. Happiness was confident that one day Seiga would surpass Sansui. Sansui noticed Rain's consistent silence. He knew his daughter was restless, but pretended as if nothing was wrong then. Sansui started a class teaching Town and Seiga directly. The first lesson was the swordsmanship that Sansui had learned from Pandora kept staring at Sansui and making cutting remarks. Her attitude was due to her hatred for Swaboku, who she despised for being too perfect, unbeatable, and immortal. Akril looked beautiful, but seemed slightly off in her thinking. She was completely indifferent to Shun's blunt words and still found him incredibly cool. Returning to Sansui lesson, Seiga realized he had no skills at all. Sansui candidly remarked that many of Seiga's powers were not really necessary. Dway, sitting outside, further demoralized Seiga, making him feel he had no future. Nuri then visited Chu's house to meet Sansui at a mansion in the territory of the new Domino state. Luku made a historic decision. He would fight to the end until the emperor was completely defeated. Nuri, surveying the surroundings, found it interesting that everyone present had a unique status. This cunning old fox, though resentful of being turned away by the king and the clan leaders, thought he could still manipulate these young people. Nuri calculated that with just a little incentive, he could easily persuade them all, like taking candy from a baby. Sansui interrupted his thoughts. Nuri went straight to the point, announcing that Rain could become the next queen. Sansui immediately affirmed that Rain belonged to the soaked family. Nuri continued to persuade Sansui that Rain becoming queen would ensure her a bright future. Dway immediately twisted Nur's words, suggesting that the old man implied Rain would have no future if she stayed with the soaked. Nuri suppressed his anger, reminding himself that retaliating against Dway would not be in his favor. After pausing for a moment, Nuri argued that nothing was better than becoming a queen. Moreover, unlike Arcana's parliamentary system, Domino had only one sole ruler, as Queen Rain would have her commands obeyed by the Empire. Shizu asked why Nur's country had collapsed, leaving him speechless. Palette openly criticized him as a greedy fool, feeling sorry for the people who suffered the consequences of their ruler's action. Nuri still tried to salvage the situation by bringing up the so-called national interests to blindside Sansui group. He reasoned that they would become the bearers of responsibility for Arcana's future. Akril joined in teasing Nuri, saying the Dia family would lend their entire army to him if he had the money to pay her. Nuri was so furious he almost lunged forward. Sean, from beginning to end, treated Nur's words as mere background noise, even threatening to pack him up and throw him away. Enraged, Nuri left, refusing to be humiliated by these kids. Nuri was brewing a plan for revenge in his mind. According to Akril, Arana had already decided to expel the traitors. What happened next would depend on UK's decision. Everything about Uku remained a mystery. No one knew how powerful he was or whether he would kill Rain in the inner city of Domino. People were buzz with rumors about Domino's defeat by the Caputo house. A palpable sense of anxiety enveloped the city as everyone feared for their safety. Meanwhile, Uku, the Country's leader gathered the highest authorities in the palace for a meeting before addressing the main issue. Oku demanded the army chief explain why they had suffered a disastrous defeat against Kudo. The commander, trembling honestly, replied that the Domino army faced a witch who could kill tens of thousands with just a blink, making it impossible to fight back. The commander earnestly begged Oku for a chance to redeem himself, as he was also a key player in the rebellion. Oku countered, asking how he would explain to the families of the soldiers who died in battle. Caught off guard by UK's tough questioning, the commander was at a loss for words. Oku insisted he be held accountable for his failure. Uk's verdict was clear: the commander must face the soldiers' families directly, and his fate would be decided by them. Despite his desperate pleas, Oku ordered the guards to imprison him. The other leaders in the room were immediately terrified. Oku then addressed the main issue, questioning why Domino had to seek peace with Arana after just one defeat. Oku, unwilling to greet Arana, politely ordered the leaders to formulate a clear plan until his return, as he would be absent for a while. He warned his subordinates that if he discovered any foul play upon his return, the perpetrators would be ruthlessly hunted down and eliminated. The remaining leaders were forced to achieve victory or face the end of their lives back in his study. Oku was greatly troubled as things were not going as he planned. Vidra and Dean's slaves suddenly started arguing, and Exer had to intervene to resolve the dispute. Oku was determined not to die until he had completed his goals. He vowed to eradicate the last trace of the former emperor from the world. UK's carriage entered the territory of the Caputo house. Before reaching the city, they passed a deep pit, a remnant of Shi's victory over the invading forces. From the observation deck, the king of Arana believed that Oku would regret opposing Arana upon seeing the pit. For the king, national interest always came first, and if there were any pests trying to undermine Arana, they would no longer be shown leniency. If Oku wisely sought peace, the king would only demand compensation for the war expenses. However, the first priority was to end the senseless war. Oku was then led to the guest room in the Caputo mansion. Meanwhile, Nuri was executing a devious plan. He had his men follow Yuku and watch the area around Shi's house, where Sansui group was staying. Additionally, Nuri hired a pair of Mandy soldiers. His intention was to eliminate everyone but ensure Rain survived. Nuri sipped his wine, envisioning the scene where the mages and nobles with Sansui were all dead. Once Rain became the successor and the old Domino Empire was rebuilt, his status would be preserved. After the war, Nuri refused to support the rebellion like Oku, considering it the dumbest mistake. One thing he was sure of was that the king and the four family heads would deeply regret not following his advice. Nuri secretly rejoiced, imagining the king and the four families bowing and begging him. Suddenly, Nuri remembered something and asked his subordinate about the heirs of the four families and who they were with. The subordinate replied that they were with Sansui and Pandora's owner. This was an unforeseen problem for Nuri. He thought for a moment and said that if Pandora's owner died, it would drag down hundreds with him. Nuri still considered Sansui just a kid. Despite his title as the Sword Saint, he also had someone investigate Shizu who couldn't use magic spells to escape, thus having a disadvantage. In using his abilities, Nuri scripted another scenario, predicting the war wouldn't end until UK's rebellion was quashed. Back at the Caputo mansion's guest room, Nuri's soldiers who were lying in wait outside burst in, intending to capture Oku. However, they underestimated UK's abilities and were all defeated by him. Oku used the divine replication weapon to defeat the assassin Anka, capable of replicating anything, allowed Oku to create thousands of porcelain vases to bury the assassin. UK's divine weapons in their material form were discussing among themselves. Vijar suspected that Arana had planted the assassins to kill Oku. Dasan SLA believed they were from Domino. Exler, oddly optimistic, found the assassination attempt interesting as it provided a chance for training. Two more assassins appeared using wind cutting magic to attack Oku. This magic implied they were mages, putting Oku at disadvantage. More assassins emerged surrounding Oku on both sides. Oku was in a precarious situation, struggling to escape the relentless assault of his enemies. Oku had no magic of his own, relying solely on his divine weapon. As the assassin's blades neared UK's neck, a sharp object suddenly sliced through them. Three assassins on UK's left immediately perished. The perpetrator was a beastman in armor, wielding a large sword. UK's four divine weapons were astonished at someone wielding four powers simultaneously. The remaining two assassins rushed to capture Oku before he could be protected. The beastmen summoned a spatial separation spell around Oku as he finished speaking. A Transparent glass box formed around UK's location, securing him in an unbreakable protective space. The remaining assassins were shocked and clueless about how to capture Uku. The beastmen leaped onto the glass box and then down to the assassin, slaying one with his sword. The other assassin attempted a surprise magic fire attack, but the beastmen's quick reflexes allowed him to move behind and kill the assassin with his sword. After eliminating the enemy, the beastmen reverted to his original form. Sega. As night fell, the Mandy troops Nuri had ordered to attack Sensui's group approached Shi's house with torches. Dway, Haynes, Akril, and Sansui sat leisurely in front of the house, seemingly unfazed. Dway ordered Sansui to behead all the Mandy daring to approach. Sansui now commenced his deadly task. In reality, Sansui had never killed anyone. He only used a wooden sword with the ability to temporarily paralyze his opponents. However, now he had to follow Dewey's orders to behead all the Mandy attackers. Sansui was in a dilemma. The torch-bearer spotted Sansui, who immediately teleported in front of him, tripped him with his wooden sword, snatched the man's sword, and as the man fell, Sansui fatally struck, decapitating him with his own sword. Blood stained the blade and dripped onto the ground. Another attacker charged at Sansui. As before, Sansui moved at lightning speed, disorienting his opponent, then precisely struck with the original sword. Sansui lamented the fact that these people only used outdated weapons. The remaining Mandy shouted to their teammates to attack Sansui before he could grab another sword. Sansui teleported again, miraculously weaving through the crowd to a torchbearer at the back, snatching his sword and executing another lethal blow. Sansui was truly following Dai's orders, decapitating all the Mandy attackers. A scene of death engulfed the area. Haynes was in shock, having never witnessed such a gruesome sight before. In contrast, Akril seemed composed. Even intrigued, Akril noticed that Sansui didn't use strength or magic, but simply utilized the sword's weight and precisely targeted the vulnerable spots on the neck. She had observed Sansui movements closely, even noticing when he checked his own next vulnerable spot while executing a move. Haynes was not only afraid of Sansui, but also of the girl standing next to her. Dway was proud to have such a strong swordsman by her side. Haynes was puzzled why someone like Sansui would let Dway arrogantly command him. Dway explained that the Soap family was protecting Rain. An unwritten rule was that a lord protected the family of their retainer, thus earning their loyalty. As for the Dia family, they had Shun as their trump card. Akril also ordered Shun to protect Rain, promising death by Shun's hand to anyone who dared harm Rain. Other assassins, seeing the battle at Shi's house, were moving towards the location, but were stopped by Shun. Shun flashed a mesmerizing smile, masking a deadly intent beneath. Pandora appeared beside Shun, doubling the fear of their enemies. The assassins were so terrified they nearly wet themselves, believing Shun and Pandora were near Shi's house. Impatient, one of them lunged forward, sword in hand, toward Shun. His blade grazed Shun, tearing the glossy night-colored vest, inadvertently revealing Shun's well-toned ABS, which caught Pandora's fascinated gaze. The assassin was speechless with fear, not expecting Shun to be the perfect match for Pandora. Shun, already knowing their motive, questioned them about their intention to capture Rain. The assassins, trembling and clumsy to the point of dropping their weapons, were mocked by Shun as mere dirty players, unable to even seek rewards from their nation. Despite their loyalty, upon Shun's cue, Pandora emerged into him, transforming into a colossal shadowy figure. Shun challenged the enemies to kill him if they wanted to reclaim their nation. Meanwhile, Sansui was nearly done defeating the Mandy, with only 4 or 5 remaining, standing amidst a scene strewn with severed heads, his sword still dripping with blood. Sansui presented a terrifying sight. The remaining Mandy, looking at Haynes and Akril, shifted their focus to capture the 2 girls as hostages. Sansui teleported in front of the girls, blocking their path. One Mandy, overcome with fear, dropped his weapon and fled. Sansui, not allowing any escape, swiftly appeared beside the fleeing man, swiftly decapitating him. Now only 4 Mandy remained, who threw down their weapons. Surrendering and pleading for more mercy, Sansui coldly declared that surrender would not spare them from death. Another begged at Sans' feet, claiming he did it for money and family, to which Sansui retorted that he too had a family before ending the man's life. Dway approached, commending Sansui for following orders, but criticizing his slow execution. Sansui sincerely apologized. Akril commended Sansui swordsmanship worthy of the title of the strongest swordsman in Arcana, noting the beauty of his cuts. Subsequently, Sansui proceeded to Eliminate the remaining vermin inside Shi's house apart from himself were Pallet and T. Zuga vigilantly guarding. Rain, who was deeply asleep, Shun, and Pandora, after annihilating the assassins at the villa, returned to Shi's. Resident Shun revealed that during the battle, he sensed the assassins carried poison to kill him, but their efforts were futile. Pandora and Akrill clung to Shun, completely captivated by him. Shun, feeling helpless against these two young women, wished someone could make them disappear, although everything was resolved. Sega had not yet returned. Papines was certain that Sega had efficiently handled everything. Dway felt grateful for having such competent teammates. In the backyard of the Caputo mansion, the Majin brothers were battling. The assassin Sunny, transformed into a beast, used her sharp claws to slash at those daring to attack her town. With his cloning ability, quickly eliminated the enemies in moments. On the rooftop, two assassins realized they were trapped with their comrades, nearly wiped out by the Megan brothers. They had no choice but to flee, but before they could escape, Brower swiftly dispatched them with a swift sword strike. Town praised Brower, equating his skills to those of Sansui. Sega joined Town, and Brower, disappointed for not being able to kill all the assassins himself, recalling Dewey's words, Sega felt he wasn't strong enough. Town rubbed salt in Sega's wounds, pointing out his past failures. The first time, Sega blamed his lack of effort. The second, he complained about inadequate weapons, and only the third time did he admit his failure. Town affirmed that Dai's criticism of Sega was justified, but he also acknowledged Sega's strengths. Sega had fulfilled his mission and secured the country's future, leaving no reason for self-loathing. Sunny and Brower agreed with Town, both admiring Sega's performance that night. The future leaders of the nation had completed their tasks. Now, they just needed to trust the king and the tribal elders. Later, Nuri was captured by the Royal Arana army. The next morning, Sansui and the heirs of the four clans, along with the town's siblings from the Megan country, were summoned before the king. Nuri, bound and forced to kneel, was reprimanded by the king for his futile attempt to assassinate Uku at the Caputo mansion. Nuri protested his innocence, denying involvement in the assassination plot. The king, with a contemptuous smirk, revealed that he had cleverly collaborated with the four clan leaders to trap Nuri, who was now exposed like a filthy rat, his crimes laid bare for all to see. To atone for the assassination attempt, the king proposed to extradite the nobles who had fled the kingdom and distribute their wealth. The king was keen to hear UK's opinion in light of the evidence demonstrating Arcana's loyalty. Yuku expressed gratitude for the king's offer, but sought clarification on how Arana stood to benefit from the situation. The king revealed that it was a test of UK's character. The four clan leaders smiled and nodded in agreement. The king remarked that Yuku, unlike Nuri, was not wicked or despicable and could be trusted with proper governance. If Yuku had readily accepted the offer, without question he would have fallen into the same trap as Arana. The king knew Uku could imagine what would happen if the new leader of Domino accepted Arcana's help. They would be indebted to Arana and fall under their governance. Uku then questioned whether accepting Arcana's aid would make the new leader of Domino a vassal state. The king brought up an important condition, a one-sided concession. He revealed that a young girl under Arcana's protection was rumored to be of the previous Domino Emperor's bloodline. If Arana did not receive assistance from Oku's sacred treasury, they wanted Uku to abandon the pursuit of the girl. Oke warned that Arana might end up mead in a quagmire. The king responded that if it were only a minor quagmire, Ara's demand would be a trivial price. In the end, Uku knelt, surrendering the sacred treasury to the king of Arana and seeking mercy for the people of the new leader of Domino. Thus, from that point on, Arana and the new leader of Domino could walk a joint path. King Arana and the new leader of Domino have officially teamed up. From now on, Rain will no longer be a concern for the people to expedite matters. The king decides to send his daughter, Princess Stendo, to Uku as a representative of Arana. The king also hopes that Uku will always treat Stendo well. Uku, with great politeness, extends his hand to shake Stendo, symbolizing the friendship between the two nations. Akrill has foreseen the royal family's future strategy. They plan to position Princess Stendo as the next heir to Domino. Nuri, in disbelief, dismisses everything is a joke. He cannot fathom Uku ruling Domino without the support of nobles like him. It becomes clear that Nuri is the true fool uttering nonsense. The head of the Dia clan calls upon Shun to speak. Shun asserts that Nuri does nothing but argue all day and is of no help to the king. Shun is confident that if the people of Domino were allowed to dismiss Nur's words, they would agree. The king, unable to disagree with Shun, orders his soldiers to remove Nisi The corrupt Nuri is officially expelled. Sansui kneels before the king, expressing gratitude for his actions. The king approaches Shizu and explains that Ara's peace agreement was achieved without suffering casualties. Shizu played a significant role in defending Kabuto City. Additionally, the king praises Shun and Seiga for performing their roles excellently. Seiga feels the king's praise is just for show and can't compare to Sansui. Seiga is indeed a deep thinker. On Kyle and Vajar questions Sansui about being Soka's disciple. Sansui admits to being Soka's disciple. The two girls are shocked and suggest that Sansui should die, unable to believe that Swaboku actually took a disciple. On Caillou and Vajar reaction is intense, even wanting Pandora to take action against Sansuoku. Hearing the name Swaboku for the first time becomes curious. Exeler and all four divine weapons are aware of Swaboku, who was once the owner of Exacx. Daisen SLA explains that Swaboku power is comparable to that of the gods. If Swaboku ever gets angry, both the kingdoms of Arana and Domino will be reduced to mere names. Uka decides to take responsibility for the aftermath at the deep pit where soldiers died due to his rash decision. The king, yet to witness Shi's power, is curious. With Pet's permission, Shizu creates a fireball as large as the one he previously conjured and launches it into the sky. It appears that Shi's fireball hits a ship, causing it to fall into the area of the pit. As the ship crashes down, a woman and a young boy emerge. The woman is Keisa Danua, one of the 8 saints, and the boy is Hakanoa Danua. Noticing X's presence, loudly scolds Exack for conspiring with some beast to attack them. Noah bursts into tears, blaming everything on Swaboku. Sansui is baffled by Swaboku past actions that have led everyone to want him dead. Exeler clarifies that it was all an accident, not Soka's doing. Shizu apologizes, relieved that there were no casualties, otherwise he would have been remorseful for life. Danua and Noah are surprised to see all the influential figures gathered at Kabuto. The king recognizes Dana and Noah as the suppliers of food to Arana, traveling by their flying ship. Exeler speaks up, explaining that Domino is facing a famine, and seeing the major suppliers here, he seeks their assistance. Daisen SLA, Vajar, and Onkayu are so embarrassed that they wish they could hide in a hole. Danua immediately agrees to help Domino. Thus, the kingdom of Arana is now under the influence of the 8 saints. Danua controlling the food production will focus on Domino. Noah stays with the Kabuto family. Sansui is surprised to learn that Arana has all members of the 8 saints. This, of course, does not shake the peace agreement between nations. Sansui also gains more insight into Soka's past. Brower reunites Rain with Sansui, and she is overjoyed that everything has finally settled. The war has ended peacefully, with most power holders returning to their homes. In the carriage, Pandora yawns and expresses disbelief that both Noah and Danua are in Arcana. Pandora starts comparing, noting that these two mere tools roam freely without being bound by any authority. Akril thinks that having all the 8 saints in one place is a rare sight. Shun believes this is an omen of an impending disaster. Akril turns to her grandfather, the head of the Digia clan, cheerfully stating that if something does happen, they will have to rely on him again. Elder Dia just sighs, knowing he will be busy again soon.